And welcome back, fellow football fanatics, to another episode of College Football with Sam. We're going to react to Week 11's chaos and all of the games that took place yesterday. Not all of them, but 8 of them specifically that piqued my interest. And we're going to have a blast here. We had some really close games in the Big Ten between Indiana and Penn State, Oregon and Iowa. We had some dominant performances from Texas Tech, Ohio State, Texas A&M, and also some close wins in lesser-known circles from Wisconsin and Nebraska that I really want to pay attention to. So, very exciting stuff that took place yesterday. We're going to talk about it here. Before we begin, please make sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, to comment your thoughts down below. We love to hear your thoughts and analysis. Love to hear it on College Football with Sam. So just do those things, and I would appreciate it very much. So thank you for doing those things. But yeah. I'm a little bit tired. I celebrated with my friend yesterday because he got engaged. So I went over to his place in Detroit, which is about, more specifically Dearborn, is about 65, 70 minutes away from here. And I stayed with him pretty late into the a.m. So that's why we're not going live at 10 a.m., but rather around 4 p.m. is what we're doing. So I'm a little bit hazy. Pardon me if I am hazy, but I do want to start off this show by looking at the Friday night game that I watched and that I paid attention to. That one being USC and Northwestern. The Trojans covered the 14.5 point line. They're still in the college football playoff hunt, and they beat Northwestern 38-17. Northwestern falling to 5-4, 3-3 in Big Ten play, and USC advancing to 7-2, 5-1 in Big Ten play. And what I found fascinating about this game was how early on USC was really challenged deeply by Northwestern, specifically at the lines of scrimmage, but overall they were trading drive for drive early on. So in the first quarter, we only had 2 drives. It's really fascinating, classic, I guess you could say, Big Ten West stuff, maybe more so Wisconsin, Iowa, when they're both good matchups. USC went on a 16-play, 82-yard touchdown drive that took 7 minutes and 14 seconds of clock. Northwestern follows that with a 13-play, 75-yard drive that took 7 minutes and 1 second of clock, 7-7 at the end of the first quarter. They then trade more touchdown drives, though they're shorter. They're about half as long in terms of time, or maybe 60 to 70% as long, and then their play number is also that much shorter too. 14-14, and then we exchange punts. USC, they throw an interception that is nearly returned for a pick six by Northwestern, but Maava forces the fumble from the defensive tackle he threw the football to, goes out of the end zone, is a touchback. That was a 14-point swing as USC then goes down the field in 3 plays, 80 yards to score a touchdown. That was the difference between what was going to be a 21-21 game at the half or a 21-14 game at the half in favor of Northwestern. Instead, it's 21-14 in favor of the Trojans, and the Trojans go on a 17-3 run in the second half and a 28-3 run after it's tied 14-14 from that Caleb Komolafe 2-yard run. USC is this team that, when they are in Los Angeles, just plays at a different level. And I truly do mean that. When you look at how the Trojans have played Purdue on the road, Illinois on the road, Notre Dame on the road, how they played Nebraska on the road, yes, that is a sample of teams that are much tougher than the average team they're playing in the Coliseum. Curious to see if that changes when USC plays Iowa this coming Saturday, a game we'll be covering. But also, their capacity to just pull away from teams and really pounce on them at home seems to be much more heightened than when they are on the road. They run the football better. They are very effective and efficient through the air. They control the clock. They dominated the lines of scrimmage after USC fans on Twitter were thrashing me for saying that Northwestern was winning the lines of scrimmage. And at the time I tweeted that tweet, they were. Northwestern was winning there. But really, midway through the second quarter and onward, USC just turned up the dial to another level that Northwestern couldn't match, and they were able to pull away. I thought Northwestern's game plan early on was good, but punting on 4th and 3, settling for a field goal when you're down by 2 scores late in the third quarter, those are things that are not good and an indication that you don't think you can win and you just want to make the scoreboard prettier. That is ultimately why USC covered that 15.5, 14.5 point line, winning 38-17 in a 21-point victory. A few takeaways for each team. Northwestern has a legit offensive line, very physical. I think Martez Lewis really had himself a day. And Komolafe is a yards after contact king. I mean, very effective at what he does. Has a nose, a knack of finding the right hole, using leverage, using his low center of gravity, and getting into the end zone. Also thought Preston Stone overall had one of his better games in Big Ten play, especially given the location and the caliber of opponent he was playing. But USC was just too much. USC's offensive line had a really great day. I mean, getting downfield blocks, getting 10 yards down from the initial, line of scrimmage and blocking downfield. It's incredible watching them grow. And this team is definitely better than last year's team. It's a team that should be better next year than this year. In some of their final games, they just need to find a few more wins to classify this season as success. Hopefully you win the bowl game with some of your backups to show that you have some depth and a bright future, and you can enter 2026 with serious momentum. But we'll get to this later. They're still in the college football playoff hunt. So in another sense, you could say that they're still looking forward to winning things this year. For Northwestern, it becomes a tough task because you can try to play Michigan at home in Wrigley Field, so technically not at home. Maybe you can beat them, but you're a 10.5 point underdog on the early line. Minnesota, maybe you'll be favored over, maybe you'll be an underdog, but they're not going to be an easy out. And you'll be an underdog of possibly double digits when you play Illinois on the road. Definitely 7.5 or something higher than that in favor of the Illini. So if you want to go bowling, you have to find a win there, and that's not going to be easy. The odds say you're more likely than not to lose out and miss a bowl game than to simply win 2 of those games. You're really looking for one win in that final stretch. My guess is that would probably be Minnesota. It could also be Michigan or Illinois, though. Northwestern's not out of any of those games, but they're not going to be favored, and they don't have a better roster than any of those teams. For the Trojans, Iowa's going to be a test. They're 20th in the current college football playoff poll. And how I look at it here is that Iowa and Oregon are teams with wonderful lines of scrimmage, and UCLA is a rival. You could win all of those games. I see a pathway for USC to do that now, especially given Oregon's injury concerns. There is also a path for you to lose all three of those games, and you finish 7-5, and the taste in USC fans' mouths is one of disgust. So USC has to be careful that they play to their strengths and that they stay healthy and don't suffer any more injuries, and that defensively they are able to replicate some of the success they had against Nebraska, some of the success they had after that, first 20-25 minutes against Northwestern, and some of the success they had against Michigan. They are going to have to replicate that because Iowa and Oregon are going to have more Notre Dame caliber O-line running back play than anyone else on the schedule, except for maybe Michigan before Haynes got hurt in that game. And that's going to be tough to handle. So they're in the playoff picture. They're far from likely to get there, though. Michigan, for example, the team they beat, is more likely to get to 10-2 because you'd rather host Ohio State than host Iowa and have to play at Oregon. You just would. And then between, UCLA and then a trip to Northwestern, a trip to Maryland, those are all pretty similar given the caliber of play they've put on the field. As for the Big Ten standings, Northwestern at this point is just trying to get to a bowl game, but USC on paper has an outside shot to Indy if they win out. If they win out, they'll be 8-1, 10-2, head-to-head win over Michigan. They'll knock Oregon down with a second conference loss, and if Michigan is able to beat Ohio State, you can have a three-way tie between USC, Michigan, and Ohio State, and depending on how the other teams in the Big Ten play out, USC could get to Indy. Is it likely? No, it's not. I think Indy is going to be Ohio State and Indiana as of right now. But there is, you also needed Indiana to lose to Penn State, and they almost did. They tried to, but they just couldn't do it. So Indiana at this point, there's no way they're losing to Wisconsin or Purdue. Penn State was that spot. They're not going to play that poorly again, nor are they going to face a team that good until Indy. You need Michigan to beat Ohio State, and you need to win out, and the odds of that are small. But a 10-2 USC, even if they don't get to Indy, is certainly getting to the college football playoff. So USC is still fighting for that. They're alive in the college football playoff hunt. As of this next game we got to talk about, Indiana surviving Penn State is a matchup that I expected to be very one-sided in the direction of Indiana. And initially it looked like it wasn't going to be, but that Indiana was maybe going to pull away, win by 3 scores in a very ugly fashion. But that's not what happened at all. Indiana had to make a late comeback, a late final drive from Mendoza, hitting Omar Cooper Jr. to make it 27-24 when they were down 24-20. Indiana basically tried to lose, but couldn't bring themselves to the point of having to taste a loss. They tasted adversity, they tasted defeat, but they survived Penn State on the road thanks to Fernando Mendoza cleaning up some of his earlier mistakes from the first 3 quarters and putting on a spectacular drive, capped off with a toe tap catch by Omar Cooper Jr. in the end zone to take the lead. 27-24 was the final score, and the catch of the year, best catch I've seen all season long, best catch that a vast majority of other analysts are saying is the catch of the year, the best catch they've seen all season long. That keeps Indiana undefeated. 10-0, 7-0 in Big Ten Conference play. At this point, with them being a 30.5-point favorite over the Wisconsin Badgers, and they're going to be a 3-4 score favorite over Purdue on the road as well, especially off the bye. I got to think that Indiana is a lock to go to Indianapolis at this point. Don't let the locker room hear that, although I think after yesterday's performance, Cignetti is probably going to chew them out, and they're going to have to go back to the drawing board, review things on film, and correct things, because that was not a good performance. Penn State scored 24 points, and some of that was due to, a play here, a play there, where Indiana gave up a big play or a big gain. But I think the real difference between what Indiana did against Penn State on the road and what Ohio State did to Penn State at home is that Ohio State has high caliber alien athletes at wide receiver, and they had a healthy offensive line for most of the game, and Indiana did not. Indiana is just not quite as talented as Ohio State. One of my takeaways from this game is that, yeah, Indiana is a national title contender, but Ohio State's number one. There might be another team or two who are ahead of them. And a lot of that does have to do with depth, but also due to their current injury situation. I don't know if Indiana is dramatically thinner than some of the other teams at the top. I do think they're thinner, but much thinner, several standard deviations thinner. I don't know. But they were without Surratt. Mendoza didn't play all that well. Charlie Becker at receiver for the Hoosiers played well. But the interception early fourth quarter where it felt like Mendoza didn't understand that Penn State has athletes that can quickly close on their assigned receiver or the receiver in their zone, or where he was missing guys, or Omar Cooper Jr. had that amazing catch in the fourth quarter, but late second quarter, Mendoza threw a perfect dime to the corner of the end zone and he dropped it. That, I think, is the biggest difference between Indiana and Ohio State, for example, right now. It's not the defense. I think both defenses actually played pretty similarly. The difference is the caliber of athlete at receiver, and the fact that Jeremiah Smith never drops anything, Carnell Tate doesn't drop anything, the fact that with Mendoza, he's more mobile than Sayin. He does have a bigger frame, but Sayin has had a higher completion percentage, not just because of his receivers, but I think he has the upside in quick release and accuracy, where he's a little bit better than Mendoza there. I'm not trying to make too many comparisons between the two quarterbacks. I think they're both good in their own right, and I believe Mendoza is better in certain aspects than Julian Sayin is. I think he's proven several times that he's clutch. We have not seen Sayin try to pull away from a close game. A lot of things have just been around him. Everything's worked. It's not saying he's not clutch. We just don't know it yet. And as for the arm strength, I don't know enough to go there, but the same throws that I've seen Sayin make that are beautiful bombs over the top, I've also seen Mendoza make. I think a lot of the quick game and quick release goes Sayin's way. But also, as I mentioned earlier, the biggest difference in this game that helped Penn State stay in it and make a comeback is that Ohio State can have one play for 70 yards over the top because they have elite NFL receivers, one of whom could be round one, pick one, and they have healthy tackles. So some of it's wrong place, wrong time for Indiana. Other things is because, no, they don't match up quite as well with Penn State and some of these other top teams, depending on who those top teams are, that an Ohio State does, for example. I still think after this game, though, that Indiana's a top 3 team. Are they number 1? I would put Ohio State there. Are they number 2? I think now there's a debate between them and Alabama for that spot. I don't think Ohio State is the obvious number 1, but I think they have the strongest argument. If you want to say Indiana's number 1, with the win over Oregon and how they've played when healthy, I have absolutely no problem with that, but I'm not going to go there quite yet. You see it in the metrics where they did drop a few points, but not many. They're still clearly number 2 in FPI, number 2 in ESPN's efficiency, number 2 in S&P+. They played a Penn State team that is not well coached, is not all that good, but it's a tough environment, and Penn State actually, because they were able to stay in the game, due to Indiana not being able to pull away, Penn State started believing in themselves a bit. They started getting all hyped up. They had energy to them that they lacked in prior games. The environment certainly helped. It was Penn State's first home game since they fired James Franklin. And all of those things came together, and Indiana had to find a way to escape in a game where maybe if another team's playing in Happy Valley, it's already game over. But they won. And now they get to go back to the drawing board. And the best thing that can happen in a game like this is you look like crap, you don't play well, but you win anyway. So you get the best of both worlds. You don't get punished for playing badly, but you will be disciplined and you will have to make corrections in practice and on film. It was such a clutch final drive, and it doesn't make up for the mistakes that Indiana made earlier with, that bad interception, some of the misses they had. I thought Mendoza played well as a runner. He is pretty good at that. It really helps Indiana's ground game. Indiana's offensive line had some good moments. I thought that they were better than Penn State in a run blocking situation, though to be fair, Indiana probably has the best rushing defense or one of the best rushing defenses in the country. Penn State does not. They got eaten alive, though, in pass protection. Both offensive lines did, but for Indiana's, I think it was very notable. Mendoza's just better able to clean up those things than a redshirt freshman quarterback making his third start in the season. I mean, you look at Grunkmeyer, 22 of 31, completes 71% of his throws, averages 7.1 yards per attempt, QBR of 78.4, a touchdown and a pick. He had a QBR in the 80s against Ohio State. He's played well these 2 games in a row. The difference is, again, with Ohio State, is Ohio State has the receivers to naturally stretch the field and quickly compound points and successful drives on Penn State, and that makes Penn State uncomfortable and gets them out of their game plan. Grunkmeyer is too young to have to make the game his own and carry the team. And he was able to have a long pass of 43 to, I believe, Trevor Pena, and able to make some really good throws. But you also have to wonder if not for Singleton's long run, do they ever take the lead? Or if not for Singleton making plenty of Indiana defenders miss on that 25-yard receiving touchdown pass, what happens? It was a collective effort for Penn State to play this well and for Indiana to honestly put themselves in a position to be down, instead of, if they play better in a few specific situations, if Mendoza doesn't throw the pick, maybe this game's never in doubt and they win by double digits. Mendoza had a QBR of 74.8, a touchdown, a pick. He also had a rushing touchdown, 218 passing yards. The final drive is really what prevented him from having one of his worst days in his Indiana career. And you can see that in some of the drives that Indiana had, and we'll get to those in a minute, but I want to pay attention to Penn State's drive chart and circle back to that. Look at their drive chart. Look at it from about that third quarter, where they get that field goal after the interception is thrown, then they get a touchdown on an 84-yard drive and another touchdown on a 49-yard drive. That sequence where on 3 drives they score 17 points. And before that, punt, rare touchdown, fumble, half, interception. Then after that, punt, and then you have, 30, 40 seconds to get into field goal range, and they just can't do it. I really do think that Penn State's offense, look, they did play well, but Indiana defensively, I still think, beat Penn State's offense. But the issue with the Hoosiers was their own offense either turned over the ball or quickly fizzled out, and as a result, Indiana's defense is on the field all day. And you also have that long run by Penn State from Singleton, where the ref stood in a certain position and the Indiana DB didn't properly assess how to maneuver around the referee. So he gets stuck there. And instead of it being a 10-yard gain, it's like a 50-yard gain. So it's little things like that. Football's a game of inches where, again, if one Indiana defender there makes a better decision on how to place himself on the field so he can make that tackle instead of running into the referee, Penn State maybe never takes that lead. Or if Omar Cooper Jr., instead of having his left foot an inch off the white line, he doesn't have the discipline to not tap his toe down there, it's an incomplete pass, and maybe Penn State wins 24-27. And rest in peace to Penn State. They still cannot find a win against a top 5 team. Their only top 5 win since 2014 is against Urban Meyer, which I think ironically enough is almost quite fitting, given some of the history of him in Ohio State versus, unranked talented teams on the road or underrated talented teams on the road. That's it. They're still searching for that win. They couldn't find it against Day. They couldn't find it against Cignetti. They have not found it against Lanning. You look at Indiana's drive chart, the touchdown, field goal, touchdown from the fumble, and then a field goal from the interception out of the half. And I think that series right there says more of who Indiana is than the fourth quarter. But that's what one mistake and play that's pretty inconsistent through 3 quarters can do, especially if it's from the quarterback. That one interception put Indiana in a very precarious position from leading and, being in control to things almost falling apart. And then you have that final touchdown drive after the punt, which Indiana's defense had to come up big there to make sure that punt wasn't the final time that Indiana saw the football. Some takeaways that I have from this matchup are that Indiana got rostered. The good news about this is they had the opportunity to get rostered against Iowa, and they didn't. They trailed for a little bit in that second quarter, but they won in a similar fashion that Oregon did. And they didn't get rostered by Oregon, and an Oregon that was healthier. In fact, if anything, they rostered Oregon in Autzen. This game reminded me of, Texas Tech with their talent is just able to mostly bully people. But against Arizona State, they played a close game. And some other games this year, it was back and forth between some teams. This game reminded me of Texas Tech playing on the road against Arizona State. Now, Penn State does not have Arizona State's staff, but they do have a much more talented roster. And while Fernando Mendoza is the starting quarterback for Indiana, not the backup, he played pretty poorly at times. And his first 55 minutes of play were absolutely mediocre at best, especially relative to the performances he's put together for us at different points in the season. So Indiana played a very, very bad game. One of their worst games of the year. They looked sloppy. They were not disciplined. They were not tackling the best. Very rare things from a Curt Cignetti team. And they won anyway. And that's a good thing. That is also a bad thing in the sense that you have to take every game for what it is and add it to a part of the sample. And if you were someone like me who was looking at Indiana as, well, depending on what they do here in these next few games, they could be power rated ahead of Ohio State. This is not the Saturday to then do that. This is the Saturday that shows, in the Big Ten hierarchy, Ohio State's 1, Indiana's 2. It's the same thing from a national power ratings angle. Like Texas Tech and Texas A&M all played better than Indiana did relative to the competition they played. But you can't also take the other extreme angle and say that Indiana sucks and they're actually a bad team and they're very overrated. They're not. They're not one bit. I think they're still a national title contender. Look at what the sportsbooks think. The sportsbooks barely dropped their odds for Indiana winning the Big Ten and winning it all after this game, after they looked like complete garbage for different drives and at different points. So they got rostered, yes, but unlike last year when they got rostered and they totally fell apart, they were able to respond and come up clutch and beat Penn State's roster at certain things to close out the game. Their defense is elite. Just the offense and specifically Mendoza put them in a hole. They weren't perfect. They had some missed tackles, but this was one of their worst games. No coincidence, it's against one of the more talented offensive lines and running back groups they faced, and yet their run defense, they held Penn State to 2.3 yards per carry outside of that long run from Singleton, which that's something you can clean up. It wasn't this massive, complete open hole where no one was within 10 yards of him. There were safeties in position, but Singleton out-angled one, and the other one ran into the referee. Those are spatial awareness and situational awareness things that you can clean up very, very quickly. It's like how with Ohio State, they let Katron Allen have that run very early on, but after that, they didn't allow any more long runs. They allowed some runs that were successful, but a lot of that had to do with Penn State cleaning up different things, running to the outside with tosses, and their offensive linemen pull blocking pretty well. Indiana did a very good job limiting Penn State's rushing attack, and really outside of maybe that one play and 1.5 drives, they beat that Penn State offensive line to a pulp. Mendoza had a good moment at the end. He also played poorly. He also was clutch. We'll just have to see how he performs in these final 2 games, because over the past, I would say, 3 games, including this last one, Penn State, Maryland, and UCLA, he has not looked as good as he did against, say, Illinois. Oregon, I think, was his best game of the year outside of that pick 6. Never really had a bad play. I'm interested to see if he can maybe pick it up a little bit. He was saying some stuff before this game that was rat poison-ish, where we'll run for, 360 on you if we can't throw on you. That's something that you usually should keep to yourself. You always got to get better. You always got to be searching for ways to get better. Coming out this early in the year and basically trying to flex your muscles is not a good thing, because you haven't really won anything yet. So this is a game that humbled Indiana in a way. For Penn State, it showed that, roster-wise and coaching staff-wise, it's incomplete. Terry Smith is a wonderful leader, a great coach of young men, but he's not an elite CEO. He's not head coach material for Penn State. He is positional coach material, maybe co-defensive coordinator material, associate head coach, assistant head coach material. Him and Cignetti exchanging kind words after the game was a pleasant sight to see. It's rare that you see that amongst college football coaches these days. But Penn State needs a go-getter. They need someone who, much like Cignetti, can be aggressive, can hold his young men accountable, and help develop them to victory. And I think, whether that's Brian Hartline or whether it's not, that Penn State will find that person, because they have talent. They have some great young players. They have potential. It is a fantastic environment. It is a storied program in college football. I ultimately think at the end of the day that they are going to get someone who Penn State deserves, who they deserve, and someone who is going to help them win and perform better in big games than James Franklin, who pretty well documented. I mean, there's a reason why Penn State wasn't able to close out this game, and why after Ohio State was really able to force their hand, that Penn State sort of looked like they mentally quit, and a reason why they couldn't finish off against Iowa. That's not all on this current staff. A lot of that's like a cultural thing from Franklin, too, that they need to purge. Penn State's favored over Michigan State. They'll probably be favored in their final 3 games, but the odds of them winning all of those games are particularly slim. Nebraska's a good team. Rutgers is 1 win away from bowling, and Michigan State on the road, especially with Michigan State off a bye and them not firing Smith yet, Michigan State's going to be desperate to earn as many wins as they possibly can to keep their coach and roster spots safe entering next year. So you need to really put forth an effort in these final 3 games that we have not seen from Penn State all season long if they want to go to a bowl game. Odds say Penn State will miss a bowl game for the first time since 2020. If you count out the COVID year, it's for the first time since the sanctions. And if you count out the sanctions, I think it's the first time since like 2004 that they're going to miss a bowl game in the regular season under normal circumstances. Just a historic collapse, worse than Florida State last year from the Penn State Nittany Lions. As for Indiana, this was your toughest game in November. This was your toughest game after the Oregon game. It was ugly. It was close. Ideally, you wanted to win by more, and hopefully you can draw from this win and learn some things, because playing like this will not win you a title. It won't get you a win over Ohio State. You won't even win in the playoffs, most likely, if you play like this. But Wisconsin and Purdue are likely going to be dominant victories. And at that point, you're 12-0. You're participating in the Big Ten championship game, which I don't think any Indiana fan ever expected. And look, as long as you show up in the playoffs and probably win some playoff games, Indiana's actually, they have minus odds to reach the college football playoff semifinals, so they should win a playoff game or two, or maybe even they win it all and they win 3, because if they're 12-0 entering the Big Ten title game, they are getting that first round bye. And then the season is a tremendous success. The job that Curt Cignetti has done over these most recent 2 years is the most impressive thing from a college football coach by a mile over that 2-year stretch. It's the most impressive thing. As for the Big Ten standings here, all this did was keep Indiana in that lock to Indy spot. That's really all this did. If they didn't lose to Penn State, it's very unlikely they're going to lose to Purdue or Wisconsin, let alone play them within 3 scores. So I believe Indiana playing 2 teams that haven't, well, Wisconsin won a Big Ten conference game last night, but playing 2 teams with 1 combined win in Big Ten play, I think bodes well for them to reach the Big Ten championship game. And as for Penn State, you're just searching for like 3 Big Ten wins against opponents that you're all more talented than. So go out there and fight. Catch of the year keeps Indiana undefeated. I don't think there's anything else to say other than Curt Cignetti right now is putting together the most impressive coaching performance of the year. Are they the number 1 team? I wouldn't peg them that way, but they're close, and I do think one thing you cannot dispute is that they play hard, and this is the best coached team in all of college football. Let's talk about Texas Tech now dominating BYU. And let's actually check the live show. Oh, wow. We got plenty of concurrent viewers here. Awesome. Sweet. Well, thank you guys for coming on. Make sure that you like, make sure you subscribe. Thanks to Chris Lane and Bad A Buckeye. Don't like to curse on here. It's in his name, but I think you know what I mean. Thank you guys for being moderators on the channel, for supporting the channel and helping make this community awesome. Texas Tech destroyed BYU. This is a game that we called pretty much perfectly here. We said that Texas Tech would cover. We said they would dominate BYU, that they would blow them out, and they did. BYU never had a shot to win this game. Never. And that was even with a pretty, let's just say, pedestrian performance by the Texas Tech offense. Texas Tech scored 29 points, and 15 of those came off of field goals. Morton was 17 of 32, and he took 4 sacks and had negative 47 rushing yards. Outside of that, Texas Tech ran the ball pretty well. So you take out the sacks there. They ran it 38 times for 198 yards. They ran the ball well. When they weren't taking sacks, threw the football pretty well. They had 1 sack and 4 TFLs. They held BYU, even taking out the sack on Bear Bachmeier, to under 3 yards per carry. And Bear Bachmeier averaged fewer than 5 yards per pass attempt. This defense, I do not think it's quite as good as Ohio State's or Indiana's. We'll see in the playoffs if it's even the 3rd best, or maybe if it's better than those, or I don't know exactly where it falls, because the Big 12 does not have the caliber of athlete that especially the SEC does, but even that the Big 10 does. However, it is a phenomenal job by Shieldwood and his players, especially Jacob Rodriguez, Romello Height, David Bailey, Lee Hunter, by Cole Wislinski, by one of their cornerbacks transfer from Mississippi State. His name escapes me. Bryce Pollock. Just what a job by Shieldwood in that Red Raider defense. Texas Tech, as you all know, as you Red Raider fans know, is not a school known for defense, for fundamental soundness, for trench dominance. And that's what they showed us in this game. 368 yards to BYU's 255. If you take out sacks, they tripled up, or close to tripled up, BYU's rushing total. They were +3 in turnover margin, and the reason they were +3 in turnover margin were 2 forced fumbles, 1 in a sack, another just in general against Parker Kingston, one of BYU's top receivers, and another was an interception by Jacob Rodriguez. By the way, Jacob Rodriguez, Chris Drew, my friend from Dead Air Sports and Menace to Sports, brought this up to me. He has 7 forced fumbles, a sack, 3 interceptions, 5 passes defended, 2 fumble recoveries, and 88 total tackles. 6'1", 230 pounds. That guy's an All-American. An All-American player. And even better for Texas Tech, he's homegrown. He started out at UVA in 2021, but he's been at Tech for now 4 years. Like, at this point, he hardly counts as a transfer. I know he transferred from Virginia, but most players that use the portal use it more than just twice. He's been at Tech for 4 years. Last year had 5 sacks and 3 forced fumbles and a pick, and he just keeps getting better and better and better each and every year. He's phenomenal, and this defense is phenomenal. I'm very impressed with what Texas Tech is putting on in terms of defensive performances, and I want to read you some numbers by Game on Paper to show you how insane this Texas Tech defense is. It's jarring what they've been able to do all season long. They're number 1 in ESPN's defensive efficiency. They held BYU to a 31% success rate, to 4 yards per play, to negative 0.18 expected points added per play. They generated an 18% havoc rate and held BYU to a 3% explosive rate and 25% success rate on third down. That's insane. And what they did against Kansas State was crazy. What they did to Utah, crazy. What they did to Arizona State outside of, Jordan Tyson and Sam Leavitt, given their offense was playing that poorly, pretty crazy. No defense has overachieved my expectations more this year than the Texas Tech Red Raider defense has. For the BYU Cougars, so they're 8-1, 5-1. If they win out, which TCU at home, Cincinnati on the road, even UCF at home, none of those are guaranteed wins with how BYU plays. Utah, Arizona, Colorado, those were all close wins. They're 3-0 in close wins. And really, I would say the Iowa State was a close win too. Pick sixes and the swing they had in that fourth quarter is rare. They're really, if you really think about it, they're 4-0 in close games. That usually indicates you're going to suffer a close loss at some point, and they can lose in a close game to either TCU, UCF, or Cincinnati. They can lose any of those games. They could get dominated by Cincinnati. Not saying I would pick that, but they have a tough road ahead of them, and at the same time, it's a road filled with opportunity because they can win out, and if they win out, they'll get to rematch with Texas Tech in the Big 12 title, and maybe they'll be in the playoffs regardless of that game, but if they win the Big 12 championship game, they will certainly be in the playoffs. Looking at Texas Tech, they have a schedule where you play UCF at home, then you get a bye, and then you play at West Virginia. They should be 11-1. They will be they'll be 8-1 in Big 12 conference play. And at this point, unless they somehow wet the bed against West Virginia or UCF, I think they're almost a lock to go to the Big 12 championship game, and they have minus, I think it's like close to minus 200 odds to win the Big 12. Their odds to win that conference are so one-sided that unless they really choke on applesauce, it's a foregone conclusion they're winning this conference. That is how good of a team, how wonderful of a story that Texas Tech is. Looking at the Big 12 standings here, these are still the top two teams in the Big 12 conference. Pay attention to Utah. Pay attention to Utah, even pay attention to Arizona State. If there's chaos and, say, Cincinnati and BYU lose, and one of them will definitely lose. There's a chance, too, that both of them lose. You could see one of Utah or Arizona State sneak in. Maybe you could even see Houston sneak in, though I think that isn't as likely as seeing Utah or Arizona State get in. Pay attention to those teams. But if things continue as they have been, it should be a rematch between these two in the Big 12 championship game. I personally am not predicting that, but if BYU keeps finding ways to win, since no one on the schedule outside of Texas Tech is in the caliber or in the tier that Texas Tech is, and if Tech continues to maul teams the way they have been, there will be a rematch here. I do think that BYU-Cincinnati game is going to be very tough, though, so keep an eye peeled on the Big 12 Conference. It's going to be a very entertaining rest of November for not just the SEC, but especially the Big 12. It's more so the Big 10 and the ACC that have the weaker slates. Let's look at Texas A&M and what they did to Missouri. Wow. I mean, I just think that A&M essentially punched their ticket to the CFP. That's what I'm thinking right now. That A&M, in not just beating Missouri, but crushing them, is a lock to reach the college football playoff. Texas A&M humiliated Missouri on their own home field, holding Matt Zollers to under 5 yards per attempt and beating the Missouri Tigers 38-17. A&M covered the minus 6.5 point line. I believe that this game effectively punched Mike Elko in the Texas A&M Aggies ticket to the college football playoff. That's what I think. And why I think that? Well, I think that because you face South Carolina and then Samford in these next 2 weeks if you're A&M. Even if you lose the Texas game, 11-1 A&M gets in this college football playoff. They absolutely do. As for Missouri, they are eliminated. And A&M, they ran for over 200 yards. They were able to average more than 7.5 yards per pass attempt through the air in a good defense. They put up 464 total yards. They had 21 first downs. They won the TOP battle by almost 11 minutes. And they were 1 of 2 on fourth down and 7 of 14 on third down. It sounds like a pretty good day to me, especially when you win the turnover margin on top of that. They led 14-0 at the half and at one point led 21-0 early in the third quarter. A&M, after this game and after how Indiana played, do they have an argument to be number one? Not in a power rating sense, because you look at computerized models and Indiana and Ohio State are probably a touchdown or close to a touchdown better than A&M in a lot of these models, like FPI. FEI would have Indiana and Ohio State probably at least a third or a half of a standard deviation ahead. I know S&P Plus has Indiana and Ohio State favored over A&M on a neutral field. They probably also have Oregon favored over A&M on a neutral field, though. Don't fact check me on that for the S&P Plus portion. But from a resume standpoint, is there an argument there with that splattering of Missouri? Think about that. Let me know down in the comment section below. I wouldn't rank them number one from a resume angle. I still think that's Indiana. But that was the most impressive performance of Saturday, was how A&M completely made Missouri look helpless. Missouri's defense eventually had to take chances with how their quarterback was playing and how A&M was already up big on them. And what A&M was able to do was just break off these long touchdown runs and really put the game out of reach. After A&M, made it 24-7 late in the third quarter, Missouri did make it 24-10, but they were never after the halftime. They were never within two scores. They were never in a one-score game again. So they could just never regain momentum. I mean, Casey Conception, 48-yard pass from Marcel Reed, and then fourth quarter, Ruben Owens, 57-yard touchdown run. They had long runs, the Aggies did, of 57, 48 yards from Dalton Brooks, 28 yards from Marcel Reed. Reed had a 90.1 QBR and had a really good day. Zoller stunk it up. Missouri's defense, 1 sack, 5 TFLs, played admirably. But A&M's defense with 2 sacks and 7 TFLs played better. Their offensive line's better. They're more talented. They had the superior quarterback. Missouri's season is effectively done, honestly. And as for A&M, their season is just beginning. Because this is a team that, from my perspective, can play multiple good games in the college football playoff. They're healthy. They're getting better as the season goes on. And I'm excited to see what they can provide in a playoff setting, and especially now that they've won this game. And if they're able to, they'll probably beat South Carolina and then Samford. If they're able to then beat Texas, can they win the SEC championship? I think they can, but will they? That'll be fascinating. It's their first 9-0 start since the 90s. For Missouri, they had a very strong start to the year, 5-0, but ever since that 5-0 start, they have fallen to 6-3. Their only win at Auburn in overtime. Lost at Vanderbilt in a one-score game. Lost to Alabama at home in a one-score game. They're 1-2 in one-score games. 2-2 if you count the South Carolina game as a close game. They're only favored by 6.5 points over Mississippi State this Saturday. And at Oklahoma and at Arkansas are going to be chores. This team could be staring down the barrel of a 6-6 finish, or they could probably win 2 out of the remaining 3 games and finish 8-4, which I think would be pretty good, honestly. The Prabula injury sucks. Zoller's getting a little bit dinged up also doesn't help, and this team's incomplete, but I think Eli Drinkwitz has done a pretty good job with the Tigers. Elko has done a more phenomenal job with the Aggies, though. Their closest win of the year was Notre Dame on the road. Second closest was over Arkansas. They've had 3 road games in a row, and in 2 of them, LSU and Missouri, they have won by a combined 45 points. An average win of 22.5 points per game against LSU on the road and against Missouri on the road. That is an impressive 2-game stretch, and you thankfully then get to play South Carolina at home, then Samford at home, before playing at Texas on a Friday night. A lot of opportunity here for the Aggies, even if they don't win out, say drop that Texas game, maybe even drop the South Carolina game, or sleep, lose to South Carolina somehow, and then beat Texas. You never know with any given Saturday. This team is in the playoffs as long as they beat Samford. With the win over Notre Dame, with the wins over Missouri and LSU, with where they are currently ranked and rated, they're impressive. And this is a team that in the playoffs, if they can figure out run defense and maintain their pass rush, and if Reed can continue to take steps and that offensive line is in a position to close a game out, they can win playoff games and potentially even win the national championship. A&M is tied for first place with Alabama in the SEC standings. This game just helped them survive and advance. As for Missouri, you're out of the playoff picture. The best you can hope for is a nice bowl game. I don't exactly know what Missouri's situation looks like next year with an injured Prabula. The rumors that Eli Drinkwitz might be looking to move on to another job, but I also think that at Missouri he can build something special, and he has put on an impressive performance since he became their head coach in 2020. The Aggies handle the Tigers, and who knows? Maybe this team is the best team in America, and we just don't know it yet. Whew. Before we get on to Iowa and Oregon surviving, I do need to go downstairs and grab and ibuprofen. My head is killing me, and I'm also dying of thirst. So we will be right back here. Just sit tight, stay relaxed. After I'm back, you'll see me back on the screen, but until then, enjoy this nice animation. Oh, that's my bad. I forgot to set it to a loop. I'll do that right now so I don't forget. Um but I do want this to, yes. Hold on. Yeah. That way whenever I turn it on, it, yeah, always loops. So good. Perfect. Well, thank you for all waiting. I appreciate that. Just responding to a quick text here. Okay. There we go. Yeah, thank you for waiting, everyone. I really appreciate that. Uh Nebraska's a good problem. Two good quarterbacks. But let's talk about Oregon and Iowa. Let's do that here as we're coming up on an hour of being live here. Oh, my nose is plugged up too. I might have to drink some like tea after this show. 9th ranked Oregon survives 20th ranked Iowa by doing to Iowa what most teams are a victim to when they play the Hawkeyes. Oregon won the special teams battle, they won the turnover battle, and they dominated in the ground game. They outrushed the Iowa Hawkeyes by over 100 yards, 261 yards and 7.3 yards per carry to 101 yards, or technically 140 yards because of that minus 39 yard punt. 140 yards and a touchdown, and still around 4 yards per carry, or less than that, like more like 3.5. Iowa covered. Iowa was in a position to win late when they led 16-15 after that 4th and goal Mark Gronowski QB draw. That was a wonderful call by offensive coordinator Tim Lester. But Oregon, with Dante Moore and a very banged-up receiver corps, was able to pass the ball, move quickly and efficiently down the field, and kick the game-winning field goal 18-16 as time expired. Oregon is a tough team that is clutch, that has depth along the lines of scrimmage, that has high-caliber athletes at quarterback and in the secondary, and that is able to do just enough because of those things and great coaching to win games. Oregon was in a position here, I would argue, to dominate today. If they had DeCorian Moore healthy and Kenyon Sadiq healthy and Alex Harkey healthy, I think they possibly blow out Iowa here at home. That's not how football works, of course. And one thing I'm happy about is that I didn't second guess myself on this game. So I picked Oregon to win and to cover. And I said in the comments section, hold on, guys, we might have our first pick flip of the year on the channel. We might. Never did. Never. We never flipped it. I never got around to it because after thinking about it, after I released that video and the following day, I thought, yeah, I think Oregon's going to win. Maybe Iowa will cover, but I'll ride with my prediction. I don't think I don't think I got anything wrong, but it was a really difficult game for me to gauge. And I mean, no wonder. It was 18-16 final score. If not for the safety, Iowa can kick the game-winning extra point potentially. It just how I mean, they're not even in a position to kick a game-winning extra point because they lead, say, yeah, they lead 17-13 instead of 17 to, or instead of leading 16-15, they lead 17-13, and Oregon has to get the game-winning touchdown. So it was a very close, competitive contest. And yet, as I was mentioning earlier, Just think about it for a minute. They were down to Brycen Moore and Kenyon Sadiq and their right tackle, who's one of their best offensive linemen, one of their most physical offensive linemen. They outgained Iowa 373 to 239. Even if you take out the loss in the fake punt, that's by almost 100 yards. Iowa passed the football in a more successful manner due to two big plays, but outside of that, they didn't have a ton of success there. And Oregon rammed it down Iowa's throat on the ground for much of the game and won the turnover battle. Iowa being in this game, I think, was an impressive statement by them that they are able to win in multiple ways, where even if special teams isn't perfect, even if they're not winning the trench battle, they can still stay in games. And this also was a good game for Oregon because they can turtle up and win in that way too, where they run it the majority of the time, and you know they're going to run it, and yet you can't stop them. I have been very high on Oregon for much of the year, even extending back to the preseason. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, if they get Evan Stewart back and Brycen Moore back and Sadiq back and Harkey back in the playoffs, they're not going to get all of them back in the regular season. But say in the playoffs, all of them are healthy and they don't sustain many more injuries, or maybe one or more, but not in those key positions. This is a true national title contender. I mean, Oregon's sitting at plus 1,700 on FanDuel to win it all right now. They're very well behind Notre Dame, and they're behind a lot of these other teams that I think, why are they behind them? I know that Moore hasn't played all that well, and I know they're banged up, but we also don't know if those injuries are season ending. And let's have some of these teams, such as Notre Dame or even Georgia, let's have them play an Iowa level defense on the road in that weather and see if they do well. I don't know if they do well. So it's fascinating for both of these teams. Iowa sadly is out of the playoff picture. That would have been something that's fun. But for Oregon, they're in. I don't think they're losing more than one of their final three games. They're not going to lose to both Minnesota and USC, or to both USC and Washington. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Especially with how Iowa had the best lines of scrimmage they were going to face in the month of November, and they handily beat them there. So who else is going to beat them on the lines of scrimmage? And if not, do you really think that Maava or DeMond Williams, with the offenses they have, can move this defense for multiple sustainable drives? And by multiple, I don't mean 2 or even 3. I mean 4 or 5, because those defenses are not going to be... They're probably not going to be equipped to stop this rushing offense if what they showed yesterday at the time of this recording is going to carry over for the rest of the season. Did not mean to switch that there, but that's okay. I can edit that out. If it carries over for the rest of the season, it's not going to be a good thing for the rest of their opponents. The quarterback comparison here with Gronowski, I think he outdueled and outplayed Dante Moore, but Moore was able to put together a clutch drive similar to Mendoza in that final series, that final drive, and ultimately help the Oregon Ducks to prevail and win a big game. And they beat a top 20 ranked opponent. I still credit them the Penn State win to a certain reasonable degree. This is an 8-1, 5-1 team, and not saying they're one of the best teams in America. I think when healthy, they certainly are, but you have to give respect to what they were able to do in this game with the circumstances they were in. And Gary Bryant Jr. left the game very early and did not return. They were trotting out, from a preseason angle, wide receiver 4 as their wide receiver 1. And tight end 2 is tight end 1. And Janoris Wilson, I believe, was the tackle that replaced Harkey. They had a banged up right tackle, and Harkey's one of their best offensive linemen. So I'm very overall impressed with what the Ducks did from a rushing attack angle and from a defense angle, and also special teams angle with Sappington making 3 field goals. What I'm not impressed with is Dante Moore. I honestly thought he would perform better, but a big part of that is the fact that I did not know DeCorian Moore or Kenyon Sadiq would be injured. And if you play them in this scheme, I do believe Dante Moore probably plays at a higher level. I mean, look at Iowa's drive chart, for example. Punt, safety, punt, touchdown, punt, successful drive, but it ends in a fumble, field goal, which was a short field. It was a 58-yarder from Drew Stevens, I believe his career-long NFL-level kick. And then they have the final touchdown drive, which they needed. They got a 4th and goal QB draw. It was a very good play design, again, as I mentioned, by Tim Lester. But to limit Iowa's best offense to this drive chart, it's their best offense since 2019 easily, or maybe 2020 to that, I think is a good thing, honestly. And when you look at Oregon's drive chart, let me give you some context behind it. So, punt early on, then they throw a pick after getting the safety with a chance to go up. They throw a pick in the end zone. It's a play that maybe if it goes a different way, it's 5-0 or 9-0 instead of 2-0. Then touchdown drive. It's 9-0. Then punt, then field goal, then punt again, then another field goal, then another punt with a 48-yard drive, and then another field goal. They had a lot more success than Iowa on offense. Plenty more success. But due to some of the big throws by Gronowski and some of the key clutch moments by him and that staff, and that long field goal, Iowa was able to stay in it and at one point get to a position where they could come away with the win. Oregon was just able to beat them at kind of their own game, special teams and being clutch. And Iowa was still searching for that first upset win in Kinnick Stadium against a then-ranked top 10 team since 2021 against Penn State. Some takeaways that I have for you all here. Oregon can play turtle ball. What I mean by turtle ball is what, for example, Michigan did in 2023 against Penn State, where you say, okay, we're struggling to pass, whether our quarterback can't see the field or our receivers can't catch or can't get separation or we can't protect our quarterback. We can run on these guys and trust our defense and our rushing offense to win the day. That's what Oregon did. And they prevailed and they were successful. And that is impressive. It's very impressive. To win that way is a sign of a team that if they can figure things out offensively through the passing game, they can win it all, as Michigan did. And the difference is, Michigan had to do that because they couldn't protect the QB even though they were healthy offensively. Oregon is banged up offensively currently, and they were able to do this and win. What happens when they get those players back? Because they will get some of them back in time for the playoffs, I believe. Now, I know this Iowa team would probably lose by 20 neutral field to 2023 Penn State, and they'd lose by 30 on the road probably, or something close to 2023 Penn State. Maybe not 30, but in the 20s. I know. But it was still impressive for Oregon to do, especially given the circumstances. So they can play turtle ball. They can run for 6-7 yards per carry, keep you honest on the ground, and control the game that way. Both defenses are strong. They made key plays. The Deshaun Lee interception, the Deshaun Lee tackle on the play before that to prevent the touchdown, the forced fumble by, I believe, who forced the fumble for Oregon? I think it was Bear Alexander, who both forced it and recovered it. Jerry Mixon recovered a fumble. You also have the Oregon Ducks with Mateo Uiagalelei, Tatum Tuioti, Bryce Betcher getting sacks. Brandon Finney Jr. had a TFL and had a really impressive performance. Both defenses are strong. They're filled with great players and athletes, and it's the same with both offensive lines. They protected their quarterbacks. They got push. The difference, I think, from Oregon is their O-line is it's bigger and stronger than Iowa's is. I don't know if it's better per se, but its talent is certainly greater. And Oregon has a much deeper and better running back room. So that helped them win the way they did on the offensive line. You also have to take into account that Oregon did break off some big runs. So they had a 49-yarder from Dante Moore. That skews some of the numbers. They were able to also break off a 27-yarder from Whittington. But Iowa doesn't give up big explosive runs. They did here. And Oregon was also able to get, consistently 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 yards per pop. And that's impressive. Gronowski played well. Had jitters early on, but after the first quarter, I think he played a great game given the defense he was facing. The difference here is that special teams won. Special teams for Oregon was able to overcome the shaky start, the injuries, and playing on the road in that hostile environment with the weather situation. That was the difference here. Special teams won this game. And to see Oregon, who has struggled on special teams all year, win in that regard with, making sure that they were able to hit all 3 of their field goals. All of them, I believe, outside of maybe the final one, were from 40-plus yards. And that they were able to not make mistakes when punting, and Iowa did, won them the matchup. Iowa's schedule from here on out is difficult. You got to play at USC and at Nebraska. Both those are losable games. But you can also win out. 9-3 or 7-5 is what I see Iowa going. That's a big difference between a season that's just okay. I think 9-3 with this schedule is impressive. Beating USC and Nebraska, and obviously Michigan State at home. Win your rivalry games, get a nice road win against USC, and your 3 losses are by 1 score to Iowa State, Indiana, and Oregon. And Oregon and Indiana are teams that are probably at this point going to finish with 11-plus wins. Indiana will probably win out. I don't exactly know what will happen to Iowa State, but that's a rivalry game. It was earlier in the year when Iowa State still had some confidence. So wouldn't be a bad season at all to go 9-3. And Iowa State beat TCU. So at least they're going bowling. They're 6-4. Now 6-4. Yeah, they're 6-4 now. So Iowa's a really good chance to have their best season, all things considered, since, again, probably 2020 or maybe 2019, or even if you take into account the fact they don't play in the Big Ten West anymore and they had to play Oregon and Indiana, maybe their best season since 2015. As for the Oregon Ducks, Penn State on the road, we know Penn State's 3-6. I get that, but I do think Penn State during that game and before that was at least a top 15, top 10 caliber team. The Indiana loss is what it is. Indiana could be number 1 in America. It's not that bad. This Iowa win, combined with the rest of the body of work that Oregon's put together, convinces me that when healthy, certainly a top 5, top 4 team, as the metrics suggest. And when they're not healthy, they can still find ways to win against great teams. They should be able to at least win 2 of their final 3 games, if not win 3 of their final 3. They're that good, well-coached, and deep. As for the Big Ten standings, Iowa got knocked down to 4-2, but finishing 7-2 in Big Ten play, or even 6-3, would be impressive. Oregon has an outside shot to Indy still. But if not that, I think a 10-2 Oregon gets in, and at 11-1, they're certainly getting a home playoff game, which would be a huge advantage given the environment Autzen is and the fact that most teams in the playoff would have to travel several thousands of miles out to play the Oregon Ducks. The Ducks survive, and they advance, and their college football playoff hopes and national title hopes are alive and, depending on that injury news, well and healthy. Ooh. Do not know what's up with my head. I'm going to blow my nose really quick and get right back. Thank you for your patience. Oh, wow. Well, at least we're more than halfway there. We got the big games out of the way. Everything from here on out will be pretty quick. Again, make sure if you haven't already to like the stream, share it around with people. That way we can get more concurrent viewers, more views overall. Subscribe, hit the notification bell. That way you can get notified when we go live Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, giving you previews, more in-depth reactions, team-specific videos. Our top 10 in college football playoff projections will be out tomorrow. So, yeah. Thank you all for coming on. Okay. Ohio State dominates Purdue 34-10. I actually thought that Ohio State here was impressive. You know, they move on to 9-0. They're 6-0 in Big Ten play. Purdue, you know, you're 2-8, 0-7 in Big Ten play. You got 2 more games left. Washington on the road, then you have a bye, and then you play Indiana. It's been tough sledding for Purdue. They actually took the lead very early on, 3-0, but Ohio State, they just turned it up, scored 24 unanswered points, and really 34 unanswered points for the rest of the game, but 24 alone in that second quarter. And look, I think this is the best team in the nation. They would be undefeated against the spread if not for that garbage time touchdown. And Jeremiah Smith should win the Heisman. That's my takeaway from this game and from Ohio State's season and body of work here. Ohio State, Julian Sayin has another day of over 80% completion percentage. He's averaging 9.2 yards per attempt. It's pretty phenomenal. And they had 40 minutes of possession. Purdue's whole game with Barry Odom is to control the clock and extend long drives. And unlike Michigan, Ohio State didn't allow them to do that because they had takeaways, they forced some stops, and more importantly, they were able to capitalize on their possessions and score points off them, which Michigan was not really able to do against this team. Both teams threw an interception. Sayin threw one in the end zone, and Purdue threw one at about the 50 that Jermaine Matthews returned to about the Purdue 30. This is the best team in the country. I mean, they're impressive. 34-10, I know people were mad about the garbage time touchdown or mad about the red zone possessions. That's just what this team is. This team is not great at running the ball. They probably never will be, but Michigan in 23 was never all that great at downfield passing. They weren't, especially against the great teams. And Georgia in 2022 was never phenomenal at defending the pass against the elite teams. Like Alabama in 2021 and 2023 was a few plays away from winning it all, and those Saban teams were far from perfect. So is this team perfect? Are they 2001 Miami? No, but they're number one, and what they do is extremely impressive. They're able to, because of the high completion percentage, because of Sayin's elite release and his accuracy and the chemistry is with his receivers, they can basically game control you through the air. A lot of teams can't do that. They can only game control by running the football. What Ohio State is able to do is very Kalen DeBoer-esque in the sense that they are able to treat the passing attack as if it is the rushing attack. And you pass to basically keep the chains moving. You don't pass the football to try to keep the defense honest. Of course you do that, but you more so do that because it's what you're good at and you're so good at doing it that it's essentially as if you are a team that is wonderful at running the ball and you can always control the clock and always go on these long drives. Ohio State can do that with their receivers, with their quarterback. It was not the greatest showing in the world for the pass blocking, with Purdue getting 2 sacks and 5 TFLs, but Ohio State is they're a special team this year. They're always a top 5 team in America. This year, as of right now, I would peg them at number 1. They held Purdue to under 200 total yards, 30 first downs to Purdue's 13. And Sayin had a 87.5 QBR on, because of the interception, one of his worst days in an Ohio State uniform so far. And he has a 91.1 QBR, 24 touchdowns, 4 picks, a 192.6 passer rating. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, if not the best. And Ohio State has the best receivers. Their pass blocking offensive line, depending on the day, is one of the best. Their tight ends are good. Their defense is number one. I mean, how can't you be happy if you're a Buckeye fan? How can you not be happy? I mean, this team is fun to watch because of how dominant they are. And I love good football. And Ohio State plays wonderful football. If you're obviously an Ohio State player, we're talking about this in my Indiana segment with Penn State, you can't be you can never be happy if you're a player or a coach. The great coaches, the elite coaches, they're only happy after they've achieved something, or if they've won in a big way, whether that's in a blowout against a great team, or if they earned a really emotional key rivalry win. But then after 24 hours, you got to go back to the drawing board and prepare for the next thing. College football is a 24/7 sport. Day and his staff understand that. For Purdue, they're just going to be quick and concise here. They're probably going to lose out, which sucks because I think they've made great strides and they've improved from where they were under Ryan Walters. But they're sitting here at 2-8. They're sitting here 0-7 in Big Ten play. They're not going to win a Big Ten game until next year, or maybe it'll take longer than that. But I think Barry Odom's doing a good job with the Purdue Boilermakers. As for Ohio State, so the Buckeyes play UCLA in a night game this weekend. Then they play Rutgers, kickoff yet to be determined. You have the game against Michigan on the road at the end of the year. That's it at this point. Ohio State is not going to lose to UCLA. They're not going to lose to Rutgers. They'll probably cover the spread against both of them. I will say for that Michigan game, the spread is probably going to be single digits in favor of Ohio State. It will be, depending on which version of Michigan shows up, and you got to assume with the rivalry game, as Michigan has to assume with Ohio State, that these teams are going to come out and show their best. Michigan's best is going to be better than any team that Ohio State's played all year, including Texas due to how bad Banning was early on and the fact that it's a road game and not a home game. So for the Buckeyes, that's the game that determines whether or not you are a lock to go to Indy and a lock to receive the first. I mean, you're a lock to receive the first round bye regardless. Because if Ohio State loses to Michigan, they're probably not going to go to Indy. It probably would come down to Michigan, or if Oregon's in a tiebreaker with them, I think Oregon is probably played from a combined opponent win-loss percentage a tougher Big Ten schedule than the Wolverines and the Buckeyes. But we'll see. I think Ohio State's going to go to Indy at this point. I think they're probably going to win out, but you can't take that Michigan game for granted. It's not a free win. It's not a guaranteed win. Michigan's in a better position to win this game than they were last year by a decent chunk, and we know what happened last year. So Day and the staff and the players need to bring their best effort against Michigan on 11/29 at noon Eastern time. But they're in the driver's seat to go to Indy, to go to the playoffs. They're already locked to go to the playoffs, and they're the favorites to win the national championship and to win the Big Ten, and deservingly so. This looks like the best team in America. Things are fluid. Things are easy for them. They hit hard. They work hard. They practice hard. They strategize hard and thoughtfully. They're methodical. I really admire Ohio State. I always have. And when I look at them in Indiana, look, Indiana's coaching job, I think, is the best in America by a mile. But if we take them out of the equation, because that's pretty unfair given their circumstances and history, they're a lock for that because of, Indiana being the losingest program before Cignetti took over. A contender for number 2 is what Ryan Day's been able to do last year and so far this year with replacing the coordinators, reloading from a talent perspective, having an upgrade at quarterback, and doing well. It's a phenomenal job that Ryan Day and Matt Patricia and Brian Hartline and Tim Walton and Tyler Bowen and that entire staff has done. They're in the driver's seat to win it all, to win the Big Ten. They have to keep winning. That's the important thing. Don't take anything for granted. Just keep winning, keep being number 1 on the field, and keep having that expectation that you're going to play that way. Keep playing good football, and good things will come your way. Okay, now this is going to be pretty fascinating. Wisconsin playing Washington. I'm a little bit speechless here. If I got to be honest, I'm a little bit speechless. I don't even know how to start this off. Luke Fickell earns his first Big Ten win since, I believe, October of 2024, and he does it with his leading passer being his place kicker? His punter? Yeah. Sean West as his punter. That was Wisconsin's leading passer in their win over Washington. Just how bad of a game do you have to play for you to lose to a team who is averaging 2.7 yards per pass attempt and would have averaged less than 2 yards per pass attempt if not for your punter being 1 of 1 for 24 yards on a 4th down and 10 conversion? It's insane. It's absolutely insane. That's the only way to put it, is how crazy this is, that Washington lost this game when they entered halftime with momentum, and Wisconsin had a disastrous series with an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty that pushed them out of field goal range. What a massive disaster. But this is something we warned people about in the preview. I did not pick Wisconsin to win, but I did say fishy things can happen with the travel, with both teams coming off the bye, with Wisconsin not quitting on Fickell and announcing he's going to return, so there's no uncertainty with the players. They could sell out. And more importantly, it was snowing, sleeting, whatever you want to call it, not ideal weather. Washington having to travel out there after having to travel out to Michigan, and that travel, those thousands of miles traveled, build up. Those really don't go away. You don't really recover from those until weeks after the fact, especially when you lose on the road. See Iowa State versus Kansas State. Kansas State's probably better than Iowa State, but that loss in Ireland really was a gut punch to Kansas State, provided a lot of momentum and confidence for Iowa State. And for Washington, that loss to Michigan, I feel like, took some air out of them. And they played well against Illinois, but then come on the road to Wisconsin. And similar to the Michigan game, similar to the Ohio State game, Washington's offense is incapable of doing squat against good defensive fronts, against good Big Ten caliber defensive fronts, so great defensive fronts in the FBS. So if you have a top 10 defensive front, so Michigan, when healthy, has that. Ohio State certainly has that. Wisconsin's isn't quite that good, but they're top 20, maybe even top 15. You, when you're Washington, can't do much. You don't get much push on the offensive line. You don't get any protection if you're DeMond Williams, so you have to put everything on your back. And Washington does not have fantastic depth at receiver or on the offensive line or at running back. They're very much like USC. They're a thinner version of USC, is what Washington is. They are USC, I think, of last year in a lot of regards, where you probably take some of the strengths USC had last year from the offensive line and from the depth at receiver and running back and collect it at quarterback, and you take some of the good things USC was able to do in pass defense last year and move it to the defensive front for Washington. That's what the Huskies are. And losing to Wisconsin, losing to Michigan, and you're 6-3, you're 3-3 in Big Ten play, you're out of the playoff picture, you're out of Indy. You won the road game at Maryland, but barely. And after watching Maryland play Rutgers, Maryland's not a good team. I do not know if Mike Locksley's going to survive. Like back-to-back 4-8 seasons with those schedules means you are not a great coach. That's what that means. Like Zion Ely, Sidney Stewart, Zahir Mathis, Malik Washington would probably be better off under different regimes. Even not saying like Ohio State or Georgia or Alabama or Texas or Oregon or like Indiana caliber regimes. Not just those, not just the big, obvious, great developmental coaching and wealthy programs. But even they'd be better off at Nebraska even, or Washington, or maybe they'd even be better off at Wisconsin. I don't know. Although I want to see more before saying that maybe Fickell can turn this around. This is just one win against a Washington team who is just not ready to make these trips in the Big Ten and scale their offense against great fronts. It's a paper tiger offense. They struggle at passing and struggle at running. They struggle at doing anything offensively when they play a great defensive front. And Wisconsin, with the players they have, so Christian Allegro, Tackett Curtis, with Mason Reiger, with Sebastian Cheeks, Corey Walker, Ben Barton, Darrell Peterson, they're very deep on the defensive line and at the linebacker spot. Wisconsin is. All of their portal additions and all their development at D-line and linebacker have panned out this year. So it's very tough to move the ball on them. I know from watching how Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan played them. Wouldn't be shocked if Indiana struggles to run the ball for a half on Wisconsin, but just throws it over the top on them. And then the rushing offense comes together in the second half. That's usually how teams beat Wisconsin. But Indiana, Michigan, Oregon, and Ohio State all have great offensive lines, at least in one spectrum. Washington's offensive line isn't particularly good at anything. So when they play a front like this, they get neutered, pigeonholed, restricted, whatever you want to call it. And Wisconsin, due to forcing a sack and a forced fumble, was able to score a touchdown and then sit with their defense and lead for much of the second half. The Huskies, if they want to have a successful season, they can't afford to lose to anyone else outside of really Oregon. If you beat Purdue and UCLA, lose to Oregon, you go from 6-6 to 8-4. I think that's an improvement. This team is clearly better than last year's team. You know, they competed with Ohio State and Michigan for anywhere from a half to 3 quarters. They were competing with Wisconsin for 60 minutes. They just lost. And they handily beat Illinois, handily beat Rutgers, handily beat their non-con, and made a comeback against Maryland. And between Purdue and UCLA, they'll probably beat one of them pretty handily. But that UCLA spot before Oregon, and then the way Oregon's able to play, this team could go 7-5. They could. And Purdue, as bad as they are, they're not as bad as they were last year. And they're not atrocious in the trenches. Like, they're better than Wisconsin offensively in the trenches. They are. So Washington can't take anything lightly from here on out. As for Wisconsin, there's a good chance that they won't win another game the rest of the year. At least they did get one win at some point, but you really needed to show up against Iowa and then to show up and beat Maryland in order to go bowling. And I wonder what's going to have to happen next year for Fickell to survive. The schedule's easier, don't get me wrong, and much of this team can come back, but they're going to probably have to make some changes to their staff, to their fundamentals, to their approach, because going 3-9 even with the schedule is not good enough at Wisconsin. If they want to show that maybe they can do something next year, you got to go out and, beat one of Illinois or beat one of Minnesota, or don't lay down and die to Indiana within the first quarter. It was a good win for Luke Fickell and good win for the Badgers, but honestly, this was more of an indictment on the fact that Washington just isn't there yet. This is a team that with the Oregon game and potentially dropping one of these next two, they could finish below 500 in Big Ten play very easily. I mean, this is, I believe they were a fringe top 25 team, but after this game, you cannot seriously say this is a team that's power rated anything above like 26th or maybe 25th. This was a bad loss. It's a very ugly loss to suffer, and one that Washington could not afford, but one that Wisconsin absolutely needed. Wisconsin stunned Washington, gained some momentum for their program. They have said, athletic director Chris McIntosh has said that they're committing more to Luke Fickell financially. Very curious to see what their portal additions are, if they make any staff changes, what changes in total do they make, and how does that align with their schedule next year. Okay, so Nebraska beating UCLA, I don't think people understand how big that is. Like, that's massive. That is, wow. I mean, I didn't think I didn't think that it was a lock that UCLA would win. I wasn't confident who would win, although I picked UCLA and was wrong there. But for Nebraska at one point to be up 28-7, and for Latif to have as good of a game as he did, I know a lot of it, some of it were checkdowns, but a lot of it was him having to process things and roll out of the pocket and deliver accurate throws kind of off platform. That was really impressive. It was a huge win for Nebraska. For Nebraska to go into UCLA coming off this injury and find out that Latif is capable of making accurate throws on the move, off platform, that he's capable of progressing through his reads and helping the offense and not hurting them, and to at one point lead UCLA 28-7 on the road, to win, to cover, to at least win more regular season games than they did last year. That is huge. I cannot understate how important this win is for Nebraska. They're not going 6-6 again. Their win total regular season is yet again improving. They will go to a better bowl game than they did last year. They win yet again another close game. They've beaten Maryland, Northwestern, Cincinnati, and now UCLA in close games. They have 4 wins in close games. They are 4-2 in close games, completely defying previous Nebraska history and trends. And that is a massive credit to Matt Rule and what he's done. He is their coach. He is their man of the future. And he has built this culture into something that is really admirable. For Nebraska to allow no sacks, to get 3 of their own, to match UCLA in rushing the football, to have better quarterback play, and to beat UCLA on the road. And when UCLA made it 28-21 and gained some momentum back, Nebraska made sure they never saw the football again with Emmett Johnson. Talk about a clutch team, a team that knows their identity, a team that has some players who either after this year will be up for All-American awards or next year or in the future could. You think of it this way. Emmett Johnson has 1,131 rushing yards for 203 carries. He's averaging 5.6 yards per carry with 11 rushing touchdowns. He could, depending on the Penn State and Iowa game, finish with 1,300, 1,400 rushing yards and 15 rushing touchdowns. And he has 14 total touchdowns right now with only 1 fumble lost against Akron. Only 1. 1 turnover, 300 receiving yards, had 2 receiving touchdowns, 103 receiving yards on a screen pass, a delayed screen, and a beautiful wheel route, wonderful call by Dana Holgerson, to amass 232 total yards and 3 touchdowns, averaging about, averaging well over 6 yards per play. It's crazy stuff there. I can't overstate how big of a win this is for the Cornhuskers. To be able to hold your own in the trenches, to be able to respond to that gut-wrenching loss, to have a quarterback who I think after Raiola leaves is going to be good. I mean, talk about a true freshman who wasn't all that highly recruited, who wasn't planned to be someone who was needed for this season to be successful. And he comes in his first career start, he's 1-0. And while Nebraska, if you want to really look ahead, and we'll talk about this a bit in a few seconds, will probably be an underdog in their final 2 games. With Emmett Johnson, TJ Lateef, with the defensive effort Nebraska put on against UCLA, with what they were able to do on the ground, you know what? Why not? Why can't they win out? Why can't they go 8-4 at least? I think I overreacted maybe to the injury news a bit, but at the same time, Raiola was the best offensive player on this team. I think that's now moved to Emmett Johnson, and by the end of the year was probably going to move to Emmett Johnson due to Raiola still having some issues to work through mechanically and developmentally. Johnson's as complete of a running back as you can ask for, but the drop-off, while noticeable because Lateef threw it 15 times, I don't think he can throw it 30 to 40 times in a game and be successful in the way that Raiola can. It's not that big of a drop-off if Emmett Johnson and the offensive line continues to play this way. Now, if Raiola could play behind this offensive line, that would be something else too, but very clearly they were having him do sprint outs to pass, moving the pocket a bit, using his rushing ability. He provides a different skill set than Raiola, where he doesn't quite have, at least to my knowledge yet, would love to see him play more, the same upside that Raiola does with his arm, but he is so much more mobile, and every pass he threw, or at least most of them, I thought they were pretty accurate. He put the ball where it needed to be within reasonable reach of the receiver's palms, and he had a 98.7 QBR. Like that kid is a dog, and he's a kid. He's not just a young man. He's a true freshman. He is literally someone who is a year removed from high school. He's not, a full-grown, fully developed adult, and he was able to come out in his first start and win. It's huge. And having a 1,000-yard rusher and Key being healthy and Hunter and Ja'Cory Barney and the offensive line only allowing, I believe, 2 or 3 sacks in the last 3 games, Nebraska's making moves and taking steps forward, and I think this will be this is a team that I thought even for much of this year would be better next year, even after the Raiola injury, thought it would be better next year. But this is a team that can still make a mark with this schedule, because this schedule is probably easier than next year's schedule. So to finish strong with this schedule and to possibly win out, or at least win one more game, potentially win 9 games, including the bowl game, that will give some cushion for next year, and more importantly, give a lot of momentum entering next year and a lot of belief that, with a tougher schedule, we can compete for maybe the Big Ten championship game, or the Big Ten championship, and also the college football playoff. For UCLA, the dream season is over. I think Tim Skipper should still get the job, and between Washington and USC, there is a chance for UCLA to win one more Big Ten game. But you're not beating Ohio State. You were never beating Indiana. And this was one of those games where it was winnable. It was in front of you. You could have won it, and you didn't. But that's the same with the Northwestern game, and same with the UNLV game. You just couldn't get it done. And imagine looking back at the end of the year and, going back to the preseason and saying to someone, looking back at the end of the year, UCLA is going to miss plenty of opportunities to go like 7-5 or 8-4 with this schedule. It's crazy. And a lot of that's a credit to the job that Tim Skipper has done. I think he should be named the next head coach, but that's about all I'm going to say about UCLA. They're not going bowling with these final 3 games, barring some act of God. For the Cornhuskers, they're not going to go to the playoffs, But losing to USC and Michigan, who are 7-2, and then a Minnesota team who is at least going bowling, is not the worst collection of losses in the world. You beat Maryland, you beat Michigan State, you beat Northwestern, you beat UCLA, Akron, Houston, Christian. None of those teams are great, but at least you beat all the bad teams, or all the mediocre teams, or all the teams who are still fighting for bowl eligibility, whereas you used to lose to some of those teams. And on top of that, you have a nice win over a Cincinnati team who is going bowling, and it was a very good chance to win out with their remaining schedule and win 10 games. That's a really neat win. You have a shot still to beat Iowa. That's the most important game of the year, as Adam Carrickerson in the channel. I imagine Connor and Corn Crazed would agree. And you have a shot to beat a Penn State team who, yes, is 3-6, but Penn State on the road is probably going to be a taller task in a lot of ways than any game you've played since either the Michigan game or maybe the USC game. That's going to be tough, especially if they play inspired like they did yesterday later in that game. And that'll be the case if they beat Michigan State as the models and as the spread from the sports books thinks they do, where they're 7.5-point favorite over the Spartans this weekend. A lot of opportunity ahead of Nebraska. There's plenty of things in front of them. Looking at the Big Ten standings here, if Nebraska wins out, they're 6-3. I have a hard time imagining that everyone ahead of them, Iowa, Minnesota, Michigan, Oregon, USC, Ohio State, Indiana, in theory, all of them could win out, with the exception of USC, Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan. Two of them will win out. The other will just take one loss. But outside of when those teams play each other, even if they all win out, it's the same thing with Minnesota, Oregon, for example, and Iowa, USC. Even if that happens, if Nebraska wins out, they'll finish top 8 in the 18-team Big Ten, and maybe even higher than that. And that would be successful. This league is not, I don't think it's the SEC quite yet, but it's much deeper than the Big Ten was in the 2010s. This is the healthiest and the best the Big Ten has been in quite some time. Not just at the top, but their depth teams, Washington, Illinois, Nebraska, Iowa, would still include USC and Michigan in that conversation unless they somehow win out. They're pretty good too. So to be flirting with a top third finish in the Big Ten would be impressive for Matt Rule and the Cornhuskers. Big win again for Nebraska. Cannot overstate that. They needed this one, and they got it, and that's what the good teams and good coaches do. Finally, we can talk about just a general reaction to all the Big Ten games, all the SEC games. I'm going to quickly go and blow my nose yet again. If any of you have anything you want to ask me, just send in a super chat. I'll answer it here. We'll get off at 6:30. The first of these videos will be up at 7. Everything should be pretty much out from 7 to 9 or 7 to 10. I'll also be joining John's channel, the Big Ten Huddle, for about 30-45 minutes at 9 p.m. tonight. That video will be featured on my channel thanks to the YouTube collaboration feature. He'll reach out to me, and yeah, we'll be doing that. But I'll be right back, guys. Just got to blow my nose because I do feel pretty terrible. And thank you for your patience here. Let's spend just a few minutes talking about the Big Ten and SEC. In 5-10 minutes, I am going to be doing a quick breakdown and reaction to the entire Week 11 Big Ten slate. So let's get after it here and talk about Northwestern USC for a minute. The Trojans continue to show that they, when healthy, when prepared, and when they're not taken completely aback, can coach with anyone in America and can play with anyone in America. Yes, they had that little gimmick, fourth down fake punt where they put Sam Heward in at punter that should have been called a penalty, but they would have won. They would have won anyway. The fact that Northwestern was incapable of moving the football after the interception that was fumbled out of the end zone because Jade Mayava didn't give up on the play showed who the better team was. Northwestern was winning the trenches and making the game competitive for about 25 minutes, and then for the final 35, USC was in total control. With the injuries that Oregon has sustained, depending on how long those are, I previously viewed the Oregon game as a guaranteed, likely blowout loss for the Trojans. With those injuries, USC, I think, has a real opportunity now to reach the playoffs. If they can beat Iowa and beat them soundly, and they're healthy and Oregon hasn't brought everyone back, they should be able to go on the road and potentially upset Oregon, and they should beat rival UCLA. Nothing's a given, though. Still think it's unlikely, but the Trojans are in as good of a position as any two-loss team outside of maybe Michigan and Texas and maybe one other team, but those two come to mind, to reach the college football playoff. Oh, and the ACC champion, but maybe Georgia Tech wins out. Who knows? For Indiana, Penn State, close win, ugly performance. It's the best of both worlds if it was going to be a close game. You win, you get the reward of winning, but that does not overshadow the necessary change of direction and discipline and the raking of players in the film room due to the poor performance. Indiana moves on to 10-0. Penn State still cannot find a win against a top 5, top 10 team. For Indiana, I think this game showed that they're not invincible. No one's invincible this year in college football, but Indiana, from an efficiency standpoint, was looking to possibly be that team. No. Ohio State's number one, I think. I don't think they're invincible either, but yesterday's performance by both the Hoosiers and also the Buckeyes solidified my opinion that as of right now, Ohio State's the number one team. The Buckeyes move on to 9-0. They beat Purdue 34-10, and by the way, Indiana beat Penn State, as you can see on the screen, 27-24. USC beat Northwestern 38-17. Ohio State played a basic game where they are who they are, and that means they are a team that is elite on defense, elite through the air, below average on the ground, and they will always beat you by 3 to 4, 5 possessions if you are not one of the best teams in the country. Would love to see Ohio State, play tougher competition, but that's the case with the entire Big Ten. The Big Ten got screwed over by James Franklin being an absolute moron and completely whiffing with that Penn State roster and staff. I think many of those Penn State players will have success in the NFL. Many might have success at other schools, and many of those staffers will have success at other schools. And the common denominator for why they failed will be on James Franklin. So I don't fault Ohio State for their schedule in the same way that I don't fault Oregon for theirs up to this point, or Indiana's played, I think, a tougher schedule Big Ten-wise than Ohio State or the Ducks have, but at least Ohio State played Texas in the non-con. I don't like the conversation about Ohio State and their schedule outside of the idea that you can't call them an uber-dominant team when several teams are uber-dominant against bad competition. That's the only reason. But I think they're number one, and against Purdue, they showed that they can play an imperfect game and still be totally safe. And that's the mark of a team that is either going to win a title or at least will compete for one. And that classifies as a successful season for Ohio State either way. Rutgers had a needed win over Maryland. Happy for them, happy for Schiano. They have 2 more games left. Play Ohio State on the road after a bye and Penn State at home. I'd say they'll probably lose both, but the Penn State game will be winnable. So if they go bowling with this schedule, I got to be honest, that's a successful season for Schiano, given some of the pieces they lost and how they've developed Kaliakmanis with the tougher schedule. Like what I saw out of them. For Maryland, they are quickly losing cabin pressure. They're 14.5-point underdogs at Illinois. They're probably going to be anywhere from 7.5 to 10.5, 11.5-point underdogs to Michigan at home. And Michigan State Neutral Field at the end of the year is going to be a toss-up. This is a team that is very close to having another losing season 2 years in a row under Loxley, despite having easier schedules than they did in the Big Ten East. I think Loxley's job is in legitimate danger. Now, ideally, might you want to wait until next year to get someone new in here? Maybe. Especially since Loxley is, I think, tied with a lot of these high-caliber young players. But maybe you want to take a risk and get someone in who might be able to keep some of them or even all of them, but develop them better. Because to have the start Maryland did and then to go 0-5 is not a sign of good coaching. You would prefer good coaching over recruiting wins and having some stellar true freshmen in exchange for not winning games. Anyone would. So if Maryland doesn't quickly pull up the nose from the ground, they're going to crash, and Loxley will be gone. Oregon beating Iowa, very similar to Indiana beating Penn State. Close win. There are impressive and positive takeaways from that, but there are also some negatives. Oregon needs to get healthy. I think if they want to win a title, they are not going to win a title playing this style of football. Though, if their offensive line can move Iowa's like that, and their defense continues to perform as it has in efficiency metrics, maybe they can do that. But you need at least some offense to win a title. So for Oregon, they need to figure that out. That's a negative. The positive is they beat Iowa at their own game, and they only have one loss, and they're in the playoff picture, and their only loss is to an Indiana team that will probably finish 12-0. So I think their resume for the playoffs, at this point, favorable. This was their toughest game in November. They passed it, so they're either going to go 10-2 or 11-1, I think, at this point. Wisconsin beat Washington. Washington is not a great team. They're above average. Good teams don't lose to Wisconsin on the road. I'm sorry, they don't. Washington's offense absolutely sucks at scaling against good defensive fronts. We've been saying this for a while. At least Washington went bowling. They're probably going to beat Purdue this Saturday. And between one of UCLA or Oregon, they'll probably split those series. They just need to make sure they don't drop both of those or they don't lose out, because it feels like Washington, their lack of depth is catching up to them. And with the way the UCLA game on the road plays out, with it being the week before Oregon, that could be a trap spot. Speaking of the Trojans, not the Trojans, my gosh, the Bruins. Speaking of the Bruins, Nebraska beat them. Looked like they were going to beat them soundly early, but UCLA mounted a failed comeback. What I love about Nebraska is their culture has been the reason why they're better this year than last year. Last year, they lost a ton of close games. They didn't quite get over that hump. This year, they've been able to get over the hump time and time and time again. I don't know how much better this Nebraska team is than last year's, if not for the improvements in the culture. I genuinely don't know. With the Raiola injury especially. Like, they are much worse on the defensive line. They're probably worse at linebacker. They're much better at DB and receiver, yes, but they're also probably a little bit worse at tight end, and their offensive line isn't really the best. But they're improving on the O-line, and I think they're better than they are last year, and that's huge given this is factoring in the QB injury. TJ Lateef played incredibly well, and Nebraska led or tied for the whole game, so they were in control from the minute they stepped onto the field to the minute they walked off after winning their 7th game in this regular season. So a lot of big action in the Big Ten, a lot of great games, plenty of close competitive games. Wow, we had one, two, three, we had 4 one-score games, and Rutgers, Maryland was close. So 5 out of the 7 games were competitive. That's a phenomenal weekend of Big Ten football. That is my Week 11 Big Ten reaction. Let me know your thoughts to all of those games down in the comment section below. Now, we can look at the SEC. Here is my reaction to the Week 11 SEC slate in 5 to 10 minutes. First off, got to talk about Georgia. So Georgia was able to handily destroy is the more honest term, destroy Mississippi State. This was a trap game. Mississippi State, in theory, had some things that they maybe could have matched up well against Georgia with, but Georgia ran the football well. Gunnar Stockton had another day where he was awesome. He's 3rd in QBR right now, and you're entering that Texas game with an 8-1 record, and you're 6-1 in SEC play. This is their final SEC game of the season, and then they have a G5 team in Georgia Tech. Georgia is very much in the playoff hunt, but if you lose this game and lose the game to Georgia Tech, is a 9-3 Georgia getting in? I don't know, especially with the late losses. So everything they can do to win is a necessity. They need to win here and now. They can't sandbag or they can't save some of their depth or try to. They need to do well and to put on good performances, and this was a good performance. Ole Miss beats the Citadel 49-0. I have no thoughts on that. It's what you should expect a team like Ole Miss to do. They should feel pretty comfortable about beating Florida and beating Mississippi State and going 11-1. Texas A&M beating Missouri 38-17. A&M is one of the best teams in the country. Missouri, I know they're down Pribula. I know. But their defense and rushing attack is still good, and for A&M to more than double up on Missouri's score is an impressive feat. They have games against South Carolina, Samford, and Texas left, the Aggies do, and they should be able to win at least 2 out of those 3. And at that point, you're in the playoffs, and you're definitely getting a home game. If not, you're potentially getting that first round bye. Vanderbilt was down, I think, like 14-3 to Auburn early on, mounted a comeback. They won 45-38 over Auburn in overtime. Their playoff hopes are still alive. Like 8-2, 4-2 in SEC play. They have a game against Tennessee at the end of the year, and then I think they play Kentucky this coming Saturday. They should at least go 9-3, if not win out. And I think a 10-2 Vanderbilt, with their only losses coming to Texas on the road in a game that by the box score was close, and that huge fourth quarter, and then to an Alabama team who was favored to win the SEC, they should get in the playoffs with that 10-2. A huge win for Clark Lee, for Diego Pavia, who had an awesome day. Auburn clearly has a better offense than what we thought they did under Hugh Freeze. Just Freeze's coaching was not great. Alabama in a slugfest beat LSU 20-9. LSU they could not move that Alabama defense that now I believe is beginning to look like the strength of the Tide team. If you take out the Florida State game, which people will say that's heresy, and you shouldn't from an SOR standpoint, but from how they're playing, this is not the team that lost to Florida State anymore. They're more fundamentally sound. Simpson's more comfortable in the pocket. Their defense is hitting harder, playing harder. They're so much better, especially on defense. This team reminds me a lot of Ohio State. Honestly. They remind me a ton of Ohio State. They're not exactly the same. Not saying that. I think Ohio State is a little bit better on both sides of the football, but that could be due to the fact that there is a massive strength of schedule disparity on top of the FSU loss, and power ratings reward blowout wins over mediocre or awful teams more so than winning a close game against good teams. I mean, Alabama, that gauntlet in October was one of the more impressive runs that we've seen since 2024 conference realignment. That was impressive. This was not the best win, for sure, but a win is a win. I think it's more important that you put on your best efforts against Oklahoma and Auburn than an LSU team anyway that is incredibly limited. The fact you held them to 9 and scored just enough to more than double up their score is a good enough win for me. Kentucky, I did not watch any bit of this game or didn't even pay attention to it, so I'm not going to comment on it much. Outside of one thing, I think that Florida's probably quit. I think that they were able to be rallied and held together for that Georgia game, and then after they lost that, they lost it. I would not be shocked if... I know that Landon Tengwall is saying, for example, Penn State will need 60 players in the portal because the smaller high school class and all the guys leaving. Penn State showed effort yesterday. They want to be there. They are playing there because it's Penn State. It's similar with LSU, by the way. Like LSU, all things considered, didn't get blown out by Alabama. They didn't quit. They like being there. They like their leader. Losing to Kentucky by 31 is probably pretty indicative that you want to get out. And I wouldn't be shocked after that loss if you're actually looking at Florida at the end of the year as the team that like has nothing on their roster and they need just a total, like what they need a rebuild at Florida like what Matt Rule is doing at Nebraska, where they're not going to immediately turn it around and it will take 3, 4, or 5 years for them to become a good team again. Those are my reactions to the Week 11 SEC slate. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Okay, thank you everyone for watching. We're 2 hours and 12 minutes in. It's time for me to get off, to eat, to find out why my head is killing me, and to prepare for my live stream tomorrow. We'll be doing previews, predictions, and also want to get all these videos out so everyone who didn't watch this show, or those of you who want to re-listen to my thoughts or just comment for the sake of commenting and engaging with me can do all those things. So thank you so much for watching. See you guys very soon. I appreciate you all. Love interacting with you. Oh, we got a super chat here. Got a few super chats that I got to answer before we get out of here. So let me do those. That actually helped my head. That helped my head a little bit, if I got to be honest. So let's get these super chats in here. Gosh, it's already November 9th. That's so insane that it's already November 9th. But time flies, especially when you're having fun. Okay. The chat is pretty good today, Sam. Well, thank you, Chris Lane, for the $2 super chat, and I'm glad the chat's pretty good. That's happy. And then there's another $2 super chat from you saying, giving you my pound of flesh. Well, I appreciate that. You don't have to do that. Love your new profile photo, Ohio against the world. I'm curious to watch that Michigan-Ohio State game because I don't think Ohio State's playing anyone close until that game. I honestly think they'll beat Rutgers and UCLA by a combined 50 or 60 points is what I'm expecting Ohio State to do. It's what they should do. And as for Michigan, I am expecting them to beat Northwestern and Maryland by probably a combined 20, maybe 30, best case scenario. I don't know, because they're not as good as Ohio State, but it's going to be another year where the game has playoff implications. It has Big Ten championship game implications. This is going to be very fascinating. So good to have you on here, and good to have you in the chat as a moderator. Really appreciate it. Sean, thank you for the $5 super chat. What do you think about Dabo's comments on the refs? What ideas do you have to remedy the issue? Full-time refs, maybe? Yes. Full-time refs, and you have a system of accountability. And like a grading system where you have refs, but then you have, in the same way that teachers have teaching evaluations, or anyone in a good industry, you have like employee evaluations. You don't want to create like a whole PR firm or not PR, but HR firm. You don't want to have an HR referee firm, but maybe if you can get some of these employers to assess what their crews are doing. And you can have agreed upon rules throughout all the conferences, officiating would be better. The reason officiating is so bad is because college football is so chaotic. There is no way to enforce anything in college football right now. I mean, this is what I've been saying for a while. You know, people, the same people who call me biased because I'm a Michigan guy also called me biased because I said Michigan wouldn't be punished, and they weren't. Like in the grand scheme of things. And it's not because I'm biased, but it's because I recognize what college football is right now. It's absolutely lawless. Like, totally lawless. That's what it is. You should not and, like, you should not and will not expect any accountability for most things at this point. It's very sad. Hopefully we can get some changes to that in the future, but I think it'll take a while. Because, so your powerful schools, so Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Indiana will probably become this way if they continue to win like this, and I think they will not want to unionize or institute true salary caps. Most of them will not. Because instituting a true salary cap, you know what that means? That means everyone can get equal pay. That's what that means. And what that means is that your talent level for your bigger schools is permanently capped at even a lower level than it is now. And now's talent cap is already a lower level than what we've seen in the 2010s. So you're not going to get true law and order, I think, for a while, because true law and order will not benefit the big players. It'll benefit the TV contracts and maybe the conferences in a sense. Maybe, but that's a maybe. And the schools that, you know, run a lot of this stuff in collaboration with the TV execs, they will not benefit from this. Like, Ohio State only stands to lose with a permanent salary cap. Same with Oregon, same with Texas, same with Alabama, same with Georgia. The SEC wouldn't lose as badly as the Big Ten or a Texas Tech because they can just outspend the SEC. But your bigger schools would still lose to smaller schools that know how to hire good coaches, for example. Thank you, Sean, for the $5 super chat. I really appreciate that. Any others that we have here? Nope. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I will see you guys very soon, and have a fantastic